All right, so here we are at 9:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Jenna DeFazio. I'm one of the customer success managers for Embark, and I want to welcome you here to our Conversations with Educator webinar for September. Today, we're going to be talking about how can we support new teachers in the classroom. And we know that a lot of districts have a lot of new teachers this year. And a lot of responsibilities. So we are truly hoping that this webinar will provide you with some support and some ideas moving forward so that you can support those new teachers and hopefully increase retention so that you're not going through the exact same process again next year. We'll take a quick look at our agenda. And so in just a moment, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker who's here today. I'm so excited that she's here. And then we will get to the discussion of the guiding question while you're here today. How can we support new teachers in the classroom? And then we will open it up to some Q&A. So anything that you hear or questions that you have already, keep those in mind and we'll share those out as we get through this webinar today. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our guest speaker. Her name is Roblyn Melton, and she is the Director of Programs for SMCAA, which is the Show Me Curriculum Administrators Association. And that is an organization that does great work all throughout the state of Missouri. So Roblyn has extensive experience working with teachers and administrators and really getting them on track. She is one of our partners. We work a lot with her, and she's so knowledgeable in the area of curriculum and really just schools in general. And she's going to provide us, I know, with a lot of great information today. I'm so excited to have her here. I want to thank her. And with that, I'm going to kind of push it over to you, Roblyn. And, you know, we're going to take a look at how can we support new teachers in the classroom.
Well, thanks, Jenna. It's really good to be here with you guys. I think probably for me, when I think about the past few years and the reason that we have so many new teachers in our classroom across, I know, our state and across the nation, is that we really need to be able to provide them all of the support that they need. And that support comes in many different methods. Probably for me, when I think about supporting new teachers, the first thing I think about is being sure that we're providing those new teachers with a mentor who has not just the knowledge in the classroom or the content. Sometimes it's not even about the content. It's about the processes and the things that the new teacher will need support with during the classroom. And I'm a firm believer that mentors should have some type of training before they actually become a mentor, that they actually kind of go through a little bit of training in communications and how to support teachers. And so, you know, it all starts with that good mentor, but actually it starts with the introduction to the district as well. So I think one of the things, besides a really good mentor who kind of walks the teacher through everything throughout the year, is the idea that we really need to be sure that when we have new teachers, not just brand new teachers, but just new teachers coming into the district in general, that they have the same common working vocabulary that the district uses. For example, you know, what is a curriculum? So what does a curriculum look like in their new district, in the district that they're going to be working in? When the district says something related to learning goals, do they have the same working definition for a learning goal? So, you know, besides having a good mentor, having that introduction at the beginning of the year, even through that first quarter of the common working definitions for the district, I think is a key piece to being sure that teachers, new teachers coming in, don't feel like they're getting surprised throughout the school year. So, you know, I think having a good, maybe just a handbook related to curriculum and the one related to assessment with those common working definitions, so that everyone, all of the new teachers really kind of know what it is that they're going to be hearing throughout the year. And so, I think that's a piece that administrators have to kind of guide from the beginning. They really have to sit down and work with their curriculum committees, their assessment committees. If they have PLCs or collaborative groups, work with them on coming together to help define those guiding pieces in the district. I think that is one thing that I know takes a little bit of the nervousness off of a new teacher, is being sure that they fully comprehend everything during a conversation. And they're not going to do that if they don't know what the common working definition is. And especially now when you think about all of the new teachers that we have in districts that are coming in with no education courses. So if you think about the alternatively certified teachers, they're coming in, they have no idea. If you use the word learning target or learning goal, do they know what that means? Do they understand what a priority standard is? And do they understand the difference between formative and summative assessments? So it's not just new teachers coming in with education backgrounds, but you have new teachers in classrooms that are alternatively certified. So you really have to think about the communication piece and really being sure that those common working definitions are shared with those teachers. And that's why I think it's one of the things that I think is really important to consider, is not just do you have those common working definitions, but can you guide them through the processes where those common definitions will be used? So do you also have processes spelled out clearly for new teachers? So for example, when teachers come into the district as a new teacher, they typically come in with 4 to 5 days ahead of the regular returning teachers. And so during that period of time, are you working with them and explaining to them the process behind how the curriculum was developed? Are you explaining to them the process behind the common formative assessments that the district uses, the summative assessments that they use? And then even more specifically, can you give them the process for the data discussions that they may be having in their PLCs or collaborative groups? And so I think it's things like that that provide maximum support to new teachers. Those common working definitions, the mentors, the explanation of the processes that go on in districts. And then probably for me, in one of the functions that I do in my job, is really helping districts develop quality curriculum. And that is curriculum that's aligned to their state standards, with really good working learning targets, as well as good teaching activities that are aligned to those targets and standards, and then assessments that assess those actual learning targets or standards. Because once that curriculum is in place, the new teacher basically just has to pull up their curriculum and develop their lesson plans. They're not having to go in 18 different directions and try and find things, because everything is there in the curriculum guide. Even if you use a textbook resource or digital resource, a good curriculum would have those links in place, or those, at the very least, a description or a PDF of what it is that you want them to use. And then they have those choices to pull the learning activities that they think will work best for their classroom. And then, of course, when they do get into those data team meetings, they can explain those choices, and the other teachers that are working with them can look and make sure that they are helping them support the students with the best teaching activities. And so again, just kind of you've got a good mentor, you have good communications, you have descriptions of processes, and then that curriculum piece that's essential for any new teacher so that they can just go in, open it up, and begin planning their lessons. Because the one thing that we don't want new teachers to do is struggle, especially in those first couple of weeks with, well, where do I find this and where do I find that? Everything should be right there at their fingertips, easy to access, easy to use, and a system that they can feel like they're not alone. They've got plenty of resources. They have other teachers that have helped them with that. And so, you know, those are some of those main things that I think are so important. And I really think that, you know, administrators being able to be sure that all of those things are in place is essential, so that the new teachers have a person that they can go and talk to and say, you know, how does this process work? And can you give me a good example? So I think it's important not just that the teachers at that grade level are aware of what the curriculum looks like, but that the administrators can also kind of take them through and show them those pieces and how it all kind of fits together in their district. One of the things that I would also maybe kind of warn against with administrators is don't expect a new teacher's classroom to look like a veterans teacher's classroom unless you give them the budget to actually do that. I'm never going to forget my first year. I didn't have a classroom. I floated from room to room with a cart full of science equipment and handouts because I didn't have a textbook. And you've got to remember my first year, Jenna, was probably before you were born in 1986. Were you born yet, Jenna?
I was born
Oh, okay.
then.
Well, that makes me feel a little bit better. But I think, you know, when I look back and probably, you know, my evaluation that first year, you know, of course, they couldn't do anything about my classroom because I didn't have one. I floated to empty classrooms. And so if you think about new teachers, they're coming into a district straight from college. They may not have any extra funds to spend on just to be, you know, the borders on their bulletin board or anything else. So just having some grace in understanding that it's going to take a little bit of time for those classrooms to look a little bit more like some of the veterans teachers' classrooms. And quite frankly, secondary classrooms look quite different than elementary classrooms. I think once I became a veteran teacher, I think I may have changed my bulletin board twice a year. So, I mean, we're just less bulletin board driven than we are maybe putting up student work, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Did you have a question?
Roblyn, first of all, you have such great ideas, and I knew you were the perfect guest for this topic. And I just want to say, I love the idea that you mentioned having mentors in place, because we talked a lot about curriculum and we talked about how to get teachers, new teachers, you know, comfortable with the curriculum and able to teach a quality curriculum, you know, regardless of what type of, you know, educational background they're coming in with.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's so many other pieces, right? There's the processes, there are the vocabulary that you mentioned, and then there's dealing with students every day, right? And so I think mentioning having a good mentor who is properly either trained or been prepared to answer those questions, because a lot of times what we know is if we do have that good curriculum in place, the teacher can kind of put that piece at ease and then have a place to go to kind of figure out what to do in different situations when it comes to having now students in the room and kind of working through that and the different, you know, the different things that come up, you know, back to school night, parent teacher conferences, how are we going to support them there? And I think mentors are a great way to really start with that. So I love that you mentioned that. And the other thing that I really, really love that you mentioned is that common vocabulary, because going beyond curriculum, you know, just what are these things? What do they mean here? Because they mean different things in different districts, depending on where you are. a learning target, a learning objective, a learning goal. They may be the same thing, they may not. So really having those expectations clear and just making sure everyone is on the same page. I really think that it may seem like a minor thing, but it really sets the district itself on the right foot. And then it keeps teachers, understanding the expectations so that they're able to kind of work with those and communicate them to students, parents, community, whoever it is. So these are just great ideas. Is there anything else you'd like to mention? I know we can open it up then in just a moment to any questions that any participants may have.
Well, I think maybe one other thing that I might want to mention for new teachers is if your district does have some type of behavior plan that they use, that the mentor is sure to share with the new teacher all of those different steps and processes. And some districts don't necessarily have a set program. And so I think spending a little bit of time with those new teachers on what the expectations are related to classroom management in their district, I think is really essential. But, for me, when I think about classroom management, the number one thing is student engagement. If you have kids engaged in that learning process, then your discipline problems they're still going to be there, but they're going to be smaller. And especially once you get to know your students and which ones need to be up and moving and which ones don't want to mix with others, that really begins to kind of help you plan and think about what does student engagement look like for each of your students in your classroom. And so really just that whole idea of keeping students engaged in your classroom. And then also, probably one of the things that new teachers don't get as often is that training around working with students who have special needs. If you're coming in without an educational background, you know nothing about IEPs or nothing about 504s. So you probably don't know anything about accommodations or modifications. And so being sure that those things are shared, because a lot of times some of your discipline issues may deal with a student who may have a 504 or an IEP due to some behavioral issues or some trauma in their background. And so, really kind of working through that with new teachers is also important. And so really having maybe your special ed director sitting down with new teachers and kind of explaining, what does it mean when you have to do a modification or accommodations, and what does that look like? Not just for the brand new teachers, but even those teachers that are new into the district, being sure that everyone is kind of on that same page.
That's
I
a
just
wonderful.
wanted to throw that one in.
Oh no, I'm so glad that you did, because exactly, engagement, having those activities that really align to your individual learners, which is what you said. And I loved when you said what engagement looks like for the students in your class, because engagement may look different for different students. And a student that may seem disengaged, it might just be the way they engage with the material. It may not be that common description for what you would look at. So really looking at that, and I love how you said, a lot of the behavior issues come from, it maybe just a lack of engagement. So what can you do? What are different strategies, or what are those students' needs, so that you are really getting to the root of the behavior problem if you're having one. So, and I think bigger than anything else, those things stick out as a new teacher. It's what you notice, and you may not be able to diagnose the way you're mentioning, right? That it is an engagement problem, or it is, getting the activity to be, something that a student needs to get up and move. And so those things are really important. And I'm glad you mentioned it in this webinar today.
Yeah, and again, I think that kind of comes from having those common processes in place, and also having a wealth of teaching activities available, and including some differentiated activities. And again, that all comes back to the curriculum, being sure that curriculum piece is in place and that it's loaded with good activities to use. That way, because what works in one teacher's classroom may not work in another because of where the students are, or how they engage. I just think back to having some students that if I had asked them to lead a group and start the conversation, that would have never happened. But they were perfectly fine being the person in charge of timing a group or in charge of writing down what was happening in the group. So you have to really kind of know the kids and know the roles that you need to be thinking about assigning to each individual student when it comes to activities.
Definitely that differentiation piece. And that's, when you're, again, it really goes back to what you said, having a curriculum in place, because if the curriculum is in place, then you have the time.
Yes.
I say that loosely because I know time is very valuable, but you have the time to think beyond what you're going to do because you have the activity, but how you're going to do it to meet the needs of those kids in your room so that you're able to really get to them. And then, as you mentioned, you end up avoiding a lot of the issues and kind of getting through those things. Something that I want to get your take on that I've thought about is just the amount of what we're talking about here is a lot of information, right?
Yeah.
So I think too, something that administrators can look at is really kind of being transparent and putting kind of it all out there, but then being careful to overload, based on time of year, right? So
Yeah.
know that this is kind of your big picture, but here's the information you need right now to get through, the first day of school. And then here's what you need, so having, again, being prepared to know what's going on, but then really kind of honing in on what information needs the details maybe at that point, just to keep from overloading, because there is so much.
Exactly. In fact, probably one of the things I always tell administrators and teachers when I'm working with them is don't go beyond giving them the first unit. Let them see that first unit. Don't overload them with the entire year. Just kind of let them start with that first unit and kind of explain how, if you have a pacing guide, how that pacing guide works, and that you might not necessarily stay, toe to toe with the teacher next door, but it's okay if you're off a day here or there. So, and maybe not diving into, let's talk about the end of year assessments at the beginning of the year. Let's don't do that. Let's just kind of work them through that. So you add stuff every quarter. So, I mean, I know that that's one of the things that, because I did kind of lead the mentoring program in 2 different districts that I was in. And that is one of the things that I always started out with the mentors every year, was a calendar in which you kind of discuss with the teachers, with the new teachers, every quarter, different things, so that you're not overloading them at the beginning of the school year. But that you spend that first week when they're a new teacher, and then their first couple of days working with all the teachers, just kind of working through that first quarter and really getting them set up for those first couple of weeks. We always try to make sure that our new teachers had their first 2 weeks of lesson plans ready to go. And so that was one of the things that we asked mentors to work with them on during their time together before school started, so that they had those first 2 weeks and they were ready to go when the kids started coming into the building.
Oh yeah, that's in, I can think back to my first days as well. And I remember that was my biggest fear. What am I going to do? What am I going to say? How am I going to plan this lesson? Is it good? And so having that mentor to go through that with definitely would have, the fears that I had would have been calmed by kind of like being able to go through it and checking it with someone who has been through it and would know if it, if it looked like it would take enough time, and do I have a good set of activities there. So those are all really great ideas and strategies that I know can get put into place. And what, as we kind of wrap up here today, as I mentioned, I don't think I could have found a better guest to do this, because you have such great information and experiences, and I know that it's overwhelming, but the way you've kind of broken it down, it really feels like a really way that you can kind of get in there and create a plan with that. So I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing. And really quickly, before we kind of close out, just to kind of give a quick overview at Education Advanced. A lot of the things that Roblyn talked about, we do have products that can kind of help there. So our suite of products can help with curriculum, and it can help with testing and things of that nature. So just to keep that in mind. And if you want any more information on anything we discussed today, on any of our products, I do know that a colleague and I have wrote a couple of blog posts regarding supporting new teachers as well, to kind of complement this webinar. So our website, educationadvanced.com, you can kind of access any blog posts there. We have on a variety of topics, but specifically this one too. So a lot of the same things that we talked about here today, but a lot of others as well, just because the time is short. We want to keep this so that educators can pop in and come into these. And we know that, again, time is a valuable resource. So Roblyn, thank you so very much for joining us today. I hope
Thank
you have a great.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. All right. So thank you everyone for attending, and we'll go ahead and stop this and let you get back to your day, and wish you the greatest school year that you can possibly have. Bye now.
Have a great year.